Hello everyone and welcome back to another Skyrim comparison video. Now this is one that I've been meaning to make for a long time, and it's kind of a follow-up to the video I made comparing the three types of destruction magic in Skyrim: ice, shock, and fire. I kind of went over which one is the best form of destruction magic, and I wanted to think more broadly. Forget about just destruction, what is the best school of magic? So those of you who are new slash not as experienced in Skyrim, there's a few different types. There's 5 different schools slash classes of magic: alteration, conjuration, destruction, illusion, and restoration. And each of them obviously have their own unique abilities and sets of skill. So before we even compare them, we first have to actually establish what each of them do and their unique use. So starting from the top of the list, we have alteration. Now the main usage of alteration spells is the oak flesh and the stone flesh type of spells. Now what these do primarily is, for example, oak flesh would increase your armor rating by 40 points for 60 seconds. And then obviously you have stone flesh, which is 60, iron flesh, which I believe is 80, and then I believe you have ebony, and then I believe at the very top you have the master level one, which I forget the name of, but you do have, it's basically every single one of them is the same as the last, except it increases your armor rating just a little bit more as you go along. There is a few other spells that are kind of niche. For example, you have candle light and mage light, which both will cast light, like kind of like an alternative of a torch. The thing I like about candle light is that it's very cheap to cast, and it's literally the exact same thing as a torch for 60 seconds, and you can use it infinitely. The great thing is torches weigh 0.5 pounds, so if you know, and they run out sort of quickly. So if you're the type of guy who actually likes to use torches a lot, then you kind of have to carry around like 5 pounds of them at a time, and that can be annoying when you're like a warrior and you have a lot of carry weight already. So candlelight's kind of nice. There's also stuff like detect life, which would detect pretty much any alive thing within a certain radius of you, which is nice. And then there's also things like water breathing. You can paralyze enemies for 10 seconds. That is an expert level spell. And you also have mass paralysis, which is the master one, along with dragonhide, which basically ignores 80% of physical damage for half a minute. That's an amazing spell. That's at the end though. So the main kind of theme of alteration spells is protection, whether that be from drowning, from taking physical damage, from detecting nearby enemies. Generally, alteration is your protection school. The second school we're going to go over is conjuration. So this one is actually a very interesting one, and one that I actually really love. It's basically the summoning things school. So first of all, you have Atronachs and you have necromancy. So an Atronach, for example, would be the conjure familiar, which summons an undead wolf wherever you cast it for 60 seconds that will attack whatever you want. And then you also have a lot of creation club stuff in the anniversary edition, like conjure bone man. You also have stuff like conjure flaming familiar, which is in the anniversary edition creation club stuff. But you also have conjure flame Atronach, frost Atronach, and shock Atronach, as well as conjure daedra. And in the Dawnguard DLC you have conjure wraithman, mistman, bone man, all kinds of stuff like that. And then with the necromancy stuff, you basically just have raise zombie, which is the weakest form of it, and basically it's very simple. The necromancy stuff, you literally just raise undead. It's that simple, really. And aside from those two types of thing, you have the bound weapons. You have bound dagger, bound sword, bound battle axe, and bound bow, which just summons up its weapon. Like a bound sword would summon up a Daedric sword for 120 seconds. And what's really powerful about that is it is literally a Daedric equivalent of that weapon. Granted, it's unenchanted, so it can be outmatched by other equipment that you could find that may be enchanted, even early game, but generally speaking, extremely powerful stuff. Conjuration is kind of what you use if you're kind of weak on your own and you need to have an assistant, like a conjure flame Atronach, to help you win a fight. Like if you're fighting a giant and it's just you and Lydia's fucking dead, basically a flame Atronach is like an infinitely reviving follower that will help you and actually do lots of damage to the enemy. Granted, they are expensive and you have to have some kind of investment in order to do this. So conjuration, really, if you want to actually get any usage out of it beyond novice spells, you kind of have to be a mage, or at least a battle mage to some extent. Next up, the third class is the one everybody probably knows. It's destruction. Now if you want to, I'm going to go over this kind of briefly because I did, like I said at the beginning, I made an entire video dedicated to going in depth into frost, fire, and shock, all the different types, and actually comparing it. But basically, just destruction is your standard offensive kind of spells, like flames, which casts fire out of your hand that does 8 damage per second to enemy. You also have frostbite and sparks, which do the same thing, except frostbite also does does 8 damage to health and stamina, and sparks does 8 points of damage to health and magic. And that's basically literally it. Like, as you progress through the ranks, it just becomes better versions of these spells that do more damage. You also have runes, which is kind of like a trap almost that you can place on the ground that an enemy would walk into and take massive damage. As well as cloaks, which if you cast it, it basically makes a flurry around you of that specific element that does 8 damage per second to anything close enough to you that it can touch it. Not super amazing, but also it is help. And for the fourth one, we have illusion. Illusion is one that I recently spent a lot of time actually discovering, because in my humble opinion, I feel like illusion is the most underrated, underused school of magic, simply for the fact that it just on the surface is not good, and it's not something you would really go into as an average player. You know, the average player would use a sword, heavy armor, maybe a shield, maybe some destruction, restoration. Nobody's gonna be using the calm. Nobody's calming enemies down or enraging them. That's something you do if you're just at the point of the game you're fucking around, you know? But yeah, there is 3 sort of types of illusion spells. It's actually I believe there's 4 different types of illusion spells. You have the courage type, which for 60 seconds, anything you cast this spell on gets extra health and extra stamina, and they won't flee from combat. You have fury type spells, which basically makes an enemy up to a certain like level cap attack anything nearby it for half a minute. Although this is a little bit, it's a little bit imperfect, as they will first try and find you, because you're the first thing that aggroed on them, as you're the one who casted the spell. So unless there's something literally directly to the left of him, he's probably gonna come for you, unless you're sneaking, of course. Anyways, aside from courage and fury, you have calm, which is what you would expect. Anything that you cast it on for half a minute calms down and will not attack you. Fear, which is the same thing as calm, but instead of not attacking you, they run away. And then every rank of leveling up, you just have more powerful versions of these spells, along with some interesting other ones. For example, expert illusion, you have invisibility, which is a very powerful spell for obvious reasons, especially for like thief type people or like assassin. Caster is invisible for half a minute. Anything, an object, or activating an object or attacking will break the spell. Very great. And that's pretty much it for illusion. The last, but certainly not least school is restoration. Now this one is like actually pretty underused as well. Obviously it doesn't take a genius to know what restoration does. It's healing. This is your healing spell. If you take damage, yeah, it doesn't really require much explanation aside from that. It's just healing. But you also have a few extra things like the wards, which if you cast it, a ward, if a mage tries using magic on you, your ward will completely negate any damage they do to you until they do a certain amount of damage. For example, lesser ward, if they do 40 damage to you, then the ward will break and then you'll be vulnerable again. I've never ever had any serious usage of these spells because they cost so much magicka that you would actually be better off just spamming whatever offensive abilities you have rather than draining your limited magicka on defensive abilities, especially considering if you're fighting a mage, they're likely going to be a shock mage, which is also going to be draining your magic, so you really got to be, you know, not doing that. But aside from healing and the wards, you also have turn lesser undead, which is basically the fear spell in the illusion tree, except it only works on undead, which is interesting. And you also have more powerful versions of that. You also have heal other, which you can heal NPCs or even enemies, which is also interesting. If Lydia dies and you need her to help you, use that and she'd be good to go. But aside from that, that is basically about it. Now we're gonna quickly talk about some perks within each tree, because that is actually pretty relevant. For example, in restoration, since we're already talking about that, there is recovery, which is a nice perk to have, as it makes you regenerate magic at 25% faster, and the level 2 version of it is 50% fast. There's also the respite perk, which makes healing spells also restore stamina on top of you also have avoid death, which is immeasurably powerful. Once a day, heals the player 250 points automatic if you get below 10% health. Also in alteration, there's perks that allow you to actually take up to 30% less damage from all the magic spells, including Dragon's Breath. Dragon's Breath in the game is handled as magic. Dragons will do 30% less damage to you, which is just incredibly valuable, as you probably can guess. And you also have perks that will allow you to have your Oak Flesh abilities to give you more armor rating if you're not wearing any like physical protection. And the one last perk I want to mention is in Destruction. You have perks like Augmented Flame, Augmented Shock, Augmented Frost. Those are great because not only do they make your frost spells, for example, Augmented Frost would make frost spells do more damage, but they also make your frost enchantments do more damage. So if you have a great sword with like a frost enchantment that does 50 damage and you have Augmented Frost, you can increase that even more. Granted, if you're going to be using a great sword, you're probably not the type of guy to use Destruction that much, but even just investing in it just for a little bit to get that extra juice is immeasurably valuable. Alright, with everything said, which one is the best? I think that's actually an incredibly complicated question, as you have to kind of consider every type of way you can play the game. Like if I'm playing a thief, I'm probably going to be wanting to use illusion, if any spell is honestly. Likely illusion, possibly alteration. If I'm playing a warrior, I probably wouldn't want to use any. If I'm playing a mage, I would probably want to use all of them. So I thought about this for a long time actually, and at first I didn't even think there was an objective answer which one is the best, since all of them are pretty much equally useful and have their own abilities. But I've come to the conclusion that there is no possible playstyle in the game. There is no build, no strategy, nothing that wouldn't benefit from a restoration. When I play Skyrim, I almost always play legendary difficulty. Unless I'm recording gameplay for a video, then I will likely play on expert just to have more realistic footage. But generally, when I'm playing for my own entertainment, it's always legendary, just because I can never play on adept. It's too easy and it's not fun. And even when I'm a warrior, I find myself struggling a lot. Even with heavy armor, even with potions, even with powerful weapons, I always use restoration. When playing a thief, it's the same thing. When I play legendary, I never don't use restoration. It is so immensely important. However, every other skill, every other spell, I do find myself not using. Restoration is the only one I find myself clinging onto, especially for the respite perk. I find that just so great. Even if you don't want to have any investment into magicka or spells at all, even just having the one perk point put into novice restoration, that will help. That will grant you like hundreds of extra HP, and it will grant you like so much less having to buy potions, and you'll save so much money, so much stress. It's an amazing perk. It's an amazing tree. So with that being said, let me know in the comments if you believe I'm wrong, because I could definitely be wrong. This is just my opinion at the end of the day, but I strongly think that restoration is the best. Let me know if you agree, if you disagree, and consider becoming a channel member. I'm still just at 1 channel member, and yeah, consider becoming a channel member if you would like. If you don't want to, that's perfectly fine. But yeah, make sure you subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment down below. Stay awesome as always. Peace out.